Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight's story is titled, The Hollow Tree. Let the shadows speak.
Part 1. I was 10 the summer Elijah vanished. Our town, WRM's Hollow, was cradled in the crook of the Blue Ridge Mountains, cloaked in dense pine and forgotten by time. No stoplights, one diner, two churches, and a forest that pressed against every backyard like it was waiting to reclaim the land. Everyone called it the Hollows, though no one could say why. Back then, Elijah was my only real friend. He had a chipped tooth, scraped knees, and a wild streak that terrified parents but pulled kids like gravity. When he said, "Let's go exploring," you followed even if you knew better. The day it happened, we were playing a game we made up called King in the Trees. The rules didn't matter. You just had to climb as high as you could and not fall. Simple, stupid, dangerous. We played it anyway. It was hot that day, soupy sun-bleached heat that made the bark stick to your hands and the air taste like pine. Elijah was halfway up a crooked old cedar we'd never climbed before. I remember looking up, shielding my eyes and shouting, "You'll get sap on your butt." He laughed, flipped me off, and climbed higher. That's when the wind died. Not slowed, died. Every leaf froze mid-quiver. The birds stopped. The cicadas went silent. I remember feeling something wet slide down the back of my neck, thinking it was sweat. It wasn't. It was thick, cold, and sticky. I reached up and my fingers came back black. "Elijah," I called. No answer. I looked back up, but he was gone. The branches still swayed like something had just moved through them, but there was no sign of him. No scream. No thud. Just gone. I don't remember walking home. I just remember my mom's face when I showed up with pitch-colored sap clinging to my skin. I tried to explain. I tried to scream it out of me, but my voice didn't work right. Like the fear had clawed its way into my throat and made a home there. They said I fainted. Said it was dehydration. Panic. Stress. They didn't find Elijah. Not that day. Not ever. But that night I dreamt of the tree. It had split down the middle like a wound yawning open. Inside wasn't wood or rot or even bugs. It was hollow, but not empty. There were eyes in there, pale, lidless, watching, blinking out of sync like they didn't belong to one thing but dozens, layered on top of each other. I woke up with sap on my pillow. My parents said it was tree resin stuck in my hair. But the smell, it was wrong. Not pine, not earth. It smelled like something dead had been buried inside me. I didn't go back to the hollows. Not at first. But things started happening. Birds flying into windows. The neighbor's dog howling all night toward the woods. And every few days I'd find more sap on my shoes, on the windowsill, once even on my toothbrush. And I started hearing him. Elijah. Not like a memory. Not like grief. Like he was whispering from inside the trees. Begging. Screaming. Changing. And worst of all, I wanted to listen. Part 2. They say trauma messes with time. I think that's true, because the weeks after Elijah disappeared felt like they happened in a fogged-up snow globe. People moved around me, talking with hushed voices and careful hands, but I wasn't really there. I was in the woods, still, always. I stopped going outside. My parents said it was the shock, that I just needed time. But time didn't help. Not when every night I heard the whispering behind the walls. It sounded like bark tearing open. Sometimes it was Elijah's voice. Sometimes it wasn't. Once, I swear, it sounded like my own. I started sketching in my notebook. At first, I thought it might help, might chase whatever this thing was out of my head. But the drawings were wrong. I drew the cedar tree over and over again. Not the way it looked, but the way I saw it in dreams, cracked wide down the center like something was birthing itself from inside. Always there were the eyes. blank, milky, more than two, too many. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen when my mom found one of my sketches. Her face changed. It wasn't anger or confusion. It was fear. Real adult fear. "Where did you see this?" she asked. "I didn't. I dreamt it." She didn't say anything else. Just folded the paper neatly, shoved it into her purse, and left the room. That night, my dad nailed my bedroom window shut. Like that could stop anything. A few days later, the sheriff came to school. He stood in front of the class with his hat in his hands and told us that they were calling off the search for Elijah. They hadn't found a body, but after 3 weeks, well, they were assuming the worst. Everyone looked at me. I didn't cry. I just stared at the linoleum floor, tracing the patterns like they were roads to somewhere safer. That night, I heard footsteps outside my window. Heavy. What? I told myself it was a deer. Maybe a raccoon. Maybe my imagination. But the next morning, there were prints beneath the window. Not paw prints. Not boots. Just indentations. Deep and long, like someone had stood there for hours without shifting their weight. And in the center, a smear of black sap, right on the glass, just above where I laid my head. I started doing what Elijah used to do when he was scared. I made up stories. In my version, he wasn't dead. He had found a secret path inside the forest. Maybe an underground bunker or a hidden world behind a veil of fog. Somewhere magical. Somewhere he was waiting for me to find him. But even in the stories I told myself, the tree was always there, watching, waiting. One night I woke up gasping. The house was dark. Not night dark. Wrong dark. No moonlight. No hum from the fridge. Just silence that pressed in from all directions. I climbed out of bed and walked to the hallway. My parents' door was ajar. I peeked in. Empty. I moved toward the stairs. The air smelled thick. Not dusty, not moldy. Alive. Like wet wood and old breath. I heard something in the living room. A dragging sound. A slow shuffle. "Elijah?" I whispered. The dragging stopped. A beat passed. Then, a single knock on the front door. Not a knock, really. More like a thump. Like something soft and damp had hit it. I stepped closer. Another thump. Then a whisper. "Oh, close. Mason." I found the way back. I froze. My name had never sounded like that before. Drawn out. Hollow. Like it had passed through too many mouths before reaching mine. I ran. Didn't think. Didn't scream. Just bolted up the stairs and slammed my door shut, pressing my back against it like that would keep the world out. But I could still hear it. Outside. Moving. Sliding. Breathing. And laughing. The next morning, my parents acted like nothing had happened. When I asked where they were during the night, they just blinked at me. "We've been home, sweetie. Maybe you had a bad dream." I checked the front porch while they were making breakfast. There was something on the doormat. A strip of cardboard, drenched in black sap, and jagged on one end like it had been torn from a sword. Part 3. I didn't tell my parents about the cardboard. I knew they wouldn't believe me, or worse, they would. Instead, I stuffed it in my backpack, wrapped in an old sock, and buried it under a pile of comic books in the closet. It oozed for days. Black sap soaked into the pages of my favorite issue of the Spectre. When I pulled it out, his face was smeared, his eyes replaced by pale white rings. I stopped sleeping after that, or at least not real sleep. I doze off and jerk awake gasping, always from the same dream. Always that tree. Always Elijah's voice. But something changed in the dreams. The voice that used to beg for help now sounded resentful. Not angry, just cold, distant, like I had taken too long, like he had forgotten my name. One night, maybe a week later, I was brushing my teeth when the bathroom light flickered. not a quick flicker. A long, stuttering death rattle. When it came back on, I was staring at my reflection, but it wasn't mine. The bathroom looked the same, but my eyes weren't. They were pale, lidless, just like in the drawings. I dropped the toothbrush and ran. I told my parents I wanted to visit Pastor Lin. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if anyone could help, it was someone who talked to God for a living. He met with me after church. We sat in the old rec hall where the walls still smelled like dusty hymnals and weak coffee. He smiled like he didn't know what to do with his hands. "What's troubling you, Mason?" I hesitated, then pulled out the drawing I had made, the one with the hollow tree in the eyes. The original. The one Mom had taken and thought she'd hidden. He stared at it for a long time. Too long. When he finally spoke, his voice had gone soft. "Where did you see this?" "I didn't. I dreamt it." Silence. He stood up and locked the rec hall door. That's when I realized he wasn't smiling anymore. Pastor Lin knelt beside me and placed the drawing on the floor between us. His fingers trembled slightly. "We used to call it the watching tree," he said, almost a whisper. "Long time ago, before I was born, before the town was even called WRM's Hollow." I said nothing. I was afraid he'd stop. They say there's something ancient buried under these woods. Something that listens. Not God, not the devil. Something else. The old folks said it lived in the roots, that it fed on memory, on children. I stared at him. "So it's real?" He looked me dead in the eyes. "Real enough that we stopped going near that part of the forest. Real enough that my great-grandfather lost his sister out there. They never found her. Just a shoe stuck in the sap of a cedar tree." I swallowed. "What does it want?" "I don't know," he said. "But if it marked you, it won't stop." I wanted to ask what he meant by marked, but my tongue felt like lead. Instead, I opened my backpack and pulled out the cardboard. The second he saw it, his face went white. "This isn't just sap," he whispered. "It's pitch. The kind used in ancient rituals. Burned, mixed with blood. The old tribes believed it could seal spirits. But once it starts leaking..." He didn't finish the sentence. That night, I dreamed of Elijah again. But this time I wasn't in the forest. I was under it, beneath the roots, inside the tree. I was surrounded by children. They stood in a circle, mouths sewn shut with threads of sap. Eyes wide, weeping black. They stared at me like I didn't belong, like I had escaped when I shouldn't have. In the center stood Elijah. But he wasn't 10 anymore. His skin had the texture of bark. Crack. Flaking. His chest rose and felt like something inside was still learning how to breathe through him. He opened his mouth and the thread snapped. "Mason," he said, but his voice was like leaves rustling over a grave. "You left me." I woke up screaming, my pillow soaked in black. This time it wasn't sap. It was mud. Thick, cold, with something moving inside it. I knew then what I had to do. I had to go back, not just to find Elijah, but to end whatever was still watching from the hollow places of that tree. Part 4. I didn't sleep the night I decided to go back. Not out of fear, though there was plenty of that, but because part of me had finally gone numb. Like something inside me had snapped and stopped resisting. Like the forest had been calling me for so long, it had finally worn me down. And in the silence of my bedroom, I whispered back, "I'm coming." I waited until just before dawn. Slipped on an old hoodie, packed a flashlight, 2 granola bars, and a compass I found in Dad's junk drawer. The sap-soaked cardboard blade, I wrapped it in cloth and tucked it into my pocket like some kind of talisman. No one saw me leave. The town was still asleep, curled in its beds like nothing had ever gone wrong. The air outside was heavy, like it knew, like it was holding its breath. I didn't take the trail the kids used to follow. I went deeper, off path, through brambles and thickets, past the broken fence behind the old sawmill where the trees grew gnarled and too close together. The place people avoided without knowing why. The farther I went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of leaves underfoot and the slow drip of something thick from high branches. The sap was everywhere now, hanging in strands, coating bark. It looked like the forest had been bleeding molasses. Then I saw it, the tree, the watching tree. It wasn't the same one Elijah had climbed. I knew that instinctively. That tree was just a doorway. This one was the heart. Its trunk was split from root to crown, a black fissure wide enough to step through. It looked like a mouth, and I was the offering. I stepped closer. My boots stuck to the pitch-slick soil. The smell hit me, earth, rot, and something beneath it all like burnt wood and old breath. I raised the flashlight and shone it into the crack. No bottom, just black. But then, dozens, pale, unfocused, blinking like fish in deep water. One set shifted, locked on me, and then the tree breathed. The trunk pulsed outward like a heartbeat, and a sound poured out of it, low, guttural, almost human. Mason. Not Elijah this time. Something older, something hungry. I turned to run, but the forest had changed behind me. The trees had twisted, their trunks bending inward like they were forming a cage. The path was gone. Only thorns and darkness remained. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. A figure, stepping out from behind the watching tree. Elijah, sort of. He was taller now, his body covered in bark-like flesh, skin cracked open in lines that bled sap. His face was almost human, but wrong. His mouth too wide, his eyes too flat. He moved like his joints were misaligned, like a puppet held by invisible strings. Elijah? I whispered. He tilted his head. You're late. My mouth went dry. I came back. I'm sorry. I tried to. You left me, he said, stepping forward, the sap squelching beneath his feet. You woke it up. Now it won't sleep again. What is it? I asked, backing away. His smile widened unnaturally. It was here before us, before the town, before the names. It lives in what we forget. It feeds on what we bury. And now it's inside you too. I tried to run, but my legs felt heavy, my arms numb. Something was crawling under my skin. Black, sticky, alive. I fell to my knees, gasping. The sap was in my mouth, in my eyes. I clawed at my face, choking on it. Everything was spinning. Then hands grabbed me. Not rough, not cold, small, familiar. I opened my eyes and saw Elijah, the real Elijah. 10 years old, dirty sneakers, torn hoodie, cardboard sword. He was standing in a pool of light, somehow bright and golden even in the middle of the forest. Mason, he said softly, holding out a hand. You can still leave, but you have to remember me. I do, I croaked. I never forgot. Not just me, he said. All of us. I blinked. Around him, the woods shimmered. Shapes began to form, children. Dozens. Some older. Some barely walking. All watching. All silent. The forgotten ones. Elijah reached into his hoodie and pulled out a small, crude whistle. The one we made that summer out of a hollow reed. He put it in my hand. Blow it, he said, and run. I didn't ask why. I blew. The sound was shrill, pure, and echoed in a way that didn't belong to any earthly air. The forest screamed. The trees twisted back on themselves. The sap hissed and steamed. The ground split open with a roar. And the watching tree, it collapsed inward, folding like a dying lung. I ran, faster than I ever had. The air burned in my chest. The forest tried to hold me back, clawing at my clothes, but I broke through the thorns, through the fog, through whatever veil had closed behind me. I stumbled out into the clearing just as the sun broke through the trees, and behind me, silence. Part 5. I didn't go home right away. I sat at the edge of the woods until the sun was high in the sky, waiting for someone to come looking. No one did. It was like the world had moved on while I was trapped inside something older than time. When I finally walked back into town, my legs shook with every step. The whistle Elijah gave me was still clenched in my fist. I didn't even realize I'd been holding it the entire way. Our street looked the same. Neatly mowed lawns, swing sets, barbecue smoke curling from someone's backyard. But something felt thinner. Like I was walking through a photograph of my neighborhood instead of the real thing. My mom cried when she saw me. She hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe, then made me promise never to wander off again. I tried to explain what happened. About the tree. About Elijah. About the whistle. She didn't believe me. Or maybe she did and just didn't want to. My dad stood in the hallway, arms crossed, face pale. When I told him about the children in the woods, something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition. But he said nothing. That night, I found him burning something in the backyard fire pit. It was a shoebox. Inside were old photos. One of them showed a boy I didn't recognize, standing next to my dad as a kid, a cardboard sword in his hand. I never saw that picture again. The days blurred together. At school, people whispered. I heard my name in every hallway. Most thought I'd gone crazy. Some said I'd faked the whole thing for attention. But one girl, Mira, passed me a note during math. It only said, I saw it too. I met her after class by the rusted swings. She didn't say much, just pulled up her sleeve to show a scar on her forearm, like tree bark etched into her skin. She'd been to the woods once. Saw something move in the corner of her eye. Heard someone whisper her name in her dreams. She never went back. We didn't talk after that, but the look we shared said enough. We weren't the only ones. A week later, I started forgetting things. Small at first, where I left my backpack, the name of my teacher. Then bigger. One morning, I couldn't remember what Elijah's voice sounded like. I tried writing it down, recording what I could. But every time I closed my eyes, his face faded a little more, like someone was erasing him from the inside out. That's when I knew. The tree was still in me. Not the forest, not the sap, the forgetting. I went back to Pastor Lynn. The rec hall smelled different now. Staler, older. He looked worse too, sunken eyes, hands that trembled more than before. I told him everything. The tree, the whistle, the children, and the forgetting. He nodded slowly. It's part of the pact. What pact? His eyes drifted toward the stained glass. A long time ago, this town was built on a deal. When the settlers arrived, the forest wouldn't let them stay. Crops died. Animals vanished. People went mad. Until someone made a trade. What kind of trade? They gave it memory, he said. They gave it children. My blood went cold. You're saying the town fed it? Every generation, he whispered. One or two. Just enough to keep it sleeping. We called it tradition, a necessary evil. And my friend, Elijah wasn't chosen. That makes it worse. He was taken. Because of me. Pastor Lynn looked at me, sadness pooling in his eyes. No, Mason, because it's awakening. You just happened to be there when it stirred. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm. Then we have to stop it. You can't kill something like that, he said. Not with fire. Not with bullets. It's not a monster. Then what is it? His mouth barely moved. It's a god of rot. a thing that grows in what we abandon. It lives off what we refuse to remember. He reached into his coat and handed me something wrapped in cloth. It was a key. Rusted, sharp along the edges. "There's a door," he said, "beneath the church, locked for decades. Inside are the names, the real names, of every child the town let disappear. If you remember them, if you speak them out loud, it might weaken the tree." I stared at the key. It was warm, and it smelled like sap. That night I didn't dream, but my bedroom window cracked down the center, and through the glass I saw something standing at the edge of the woods. Tall, still, watching. Part 6. The church was empty when I arrived. No service, no choir. Just creaking pews and dust dancing in the slanted light from stained glass windows. It smelled like old wood and extinguished candles. I held the key Pastor Lynn had given me in a clenched fist. It was heavier than it looked, and it felt alive somehow, pulsing gently against my palm like a heartbeat just under the metal. The trapdoor was in the back, hidden beneath a loose floorboard behind the pulpit. I had to pry it up with the handle of my flashlight. The wood groaned like it didn't want to be disturbed. Below, a narrow staircase twisted into darkness. I descended slowly. Each step down felt like stepping further into the past. The air got colder, the walls narrower. The silence grew so loud I could hear my own thoughts scratching against the inside of my skull. At the bottom was a stone door carved with names. Hundreds of them. Children. Some I recognized from missing posters. Others from whispers. Some I didn't know at all. The key fit perfectly. When I turned it, something clicked. Not mechanical, but spiritual. Like something old and brittle had just broken. The door opened inward. The room beyond was circular. The walls were lined with shelves, and on each shelf sat a box, identical in shape and size, each one labeled with a name burned into the wood. The air smelled like cedar and rot. I stepped forward, the floor vibrating faintly underfoot, as if the place was suspended over something massive, something shifting. In the center of the room stood a pedestal. On it rested a single book, bound in dark leather. No title. I opened it. The pages were full of handwriting, names, dates, details. Every child the town had lost, not just to accidents or illness. These were the ones that were given, sacrificed, forgotten on purpose. Elijah's name was there too, but it was crossed out. Next to it, someone had scrawled one word in thick black ink. Awakened. A low sound vibrated through the walls, like something breathing through stone. Then came the voices, soft at first, then louder. Dozens of them. Children. Crying. Whimpering. Whispering. Begging. The boxes on the shelves began to tremble. I stumbled back. From one of the shelves, a lid burst open. A shape poured out, liquid and wrong, rising like smoke but too solid, too aware. It formed into a child-sized figure. No eyes, mouth sewn shut with lines of sap. Its limbs jerked like a marionette learning how to walk. It wasn't alone. Box after box cracked open, and the room filled with them. The forgotten. They began to circle me, slow, steady, silent. One stepped forward. It held something out, a folded piece of paper. I took it with shaking fingers, unfolded it. It was a drawing, crude and childish, but I recognized it immediately. Elijah and me, smiling, holding cardboard swords, standing beneath the watching tree. A sudden ache bloomed in my chest. Memory rushed in like a broken dam. The jokes we made, the way his laugh cracked on the high notes, his hand in mine when the sap first fell. I remembered everything. The figures stopped. They tilted their heads. I understood. That's what it wanted. The tree. The God beneath it. It fed on forgetting. on memory rotting like leaves. If we remembered, if we refused to forget, it would starve. I opened my mouth, and I spoke their names. Every child in the book, one by one. My voice cracked, my throat bled, but I didn't stop. As each name left my lips, a box burst into light. The figures around me began to weep, not with sorrow, but release. And somewhere deep beneath the floor, something screamed. The last name was Elijah's. When I said it, the room shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air rippled like heat rising off asphalt. The pedestal split down the middle and the book turned to ash. I fell to my knees, gasping. Then everything went still. When I looked up, the children were gone. The boxes, the shelves, vanished. The room was empty, except for one thing. A single cardboard sword lying at my feet. I carried it back up the stairs. The sun had just begun to set outside the church, painting the sky in sickly orange and deep violet. The light hit the stained glass windows, and for a second I thought I saw faces in them, watching, smiling, free. That night I stood at the edge of the forest again. The trees were silent, no eyes in the shadows, no whisper on the wind, but the air felt lighter. I dropped the sword at the base of the watching tree and whispered one final word: remember. Part 7. They say when something evil dies, the world sighs in relief. But the woods never sighed. They held their breath, waiting. After that night, I kept expecting things to feel better, cleaner, safer. And for a while they did. The dreams stopped. The whispers faded. The sap dried. People in town started talking about Elijah again. Really talking. Not the careful whispers or the avoidance. They told stories, shared pictures, spoke his name out loud. That mattered more than I realized. Mira found me after school and smiled for the first time in months. I remember my brother's laugh now, she said. And just like that, I knew it had worked. The forgetting was unraveling. But then, other things started happening. Tiny at first. Street lights flickering near my house. Only my house. Books in my room opening to blank pages. My reflection sometimes not moving in sync when I brushed my teeth. Little things. Things easy to dismiss. Until I found the sap again. Not in the woods, but under my bed. Just a smear. Black. Thick. Pulsing. Like it was breathing. I went back to the watching tree, but it was gone. Not cut down. Not burned. Just gone. In its place stood a clearing. The soil undisturbed. The grass untouched. Like nothing had ever grown there at all. And yet, I knew something was beneath it. Still alive. Still hungry. I visited Pastor Lynn, but his house was empty. No signs of a struggle. No packed bags. Just vanished. The light still worked. His kettle still warm. As if he had stepped outside and never came back. There was a single note on his desk. Read, "Some things we carry forever." I didn't know if it was meant for me, but it felt like it was. The forgetting didn't come back all at once. It crept in. One day I couldn't remember the names I read in the book. Another day I forgot the color of Elijah's eyes. By the end of the week, I couldn't remember if I had siblings. I began writing everything down. Notes, drawings, audio recordings. I plastered my bedroom walls with memories, covered the mirrors, blocked out the windows. But the sap always found a way in, dripping from the ceiling, pooling in my shoes, soaking into the edges of the photos, curling them inward like they were rotting from memory itself. Then came the knocking, always at 3:03 a.m. One knock, then silence. Some nights it was at the door, others at the window. One night, it was from inside the closet. I didn't open it, but I could hear breathing. Oh, raspy, familiar. On the 8th night I cracked. I opened the front door, and there he was, Elijah. Not the twisted version from the tree, not the ghost in the woods, just him, 10 years old, same hoodie, same scuffed sneakers. He looked up at me and smiled. "Hey," he said, "can I come in?" My throat closed, because I remembered something. He never came to the door. That day in the woods, he never came back. He vanished. No body, no sound. He didn't walk out. So whatever this was, it wasn't him. I slammed the door and locked every bolt. When I turned around, he was standing in the hallway behind me. His eyes were blank, his mouth stretched, and from his fingertips, sap dripped. I woke up screaming, soaked in sweat. The clock read 3:03 a.m. No knocks this time, but on the floor at the foot of my bed sat the cardboard sword, cling, untouched, waiting. Part 8, final. I didn't go to school the next day, didn't eat, didn't speak. I sat in my room with the cardboard sword across my lap, watching the shadows stretch across the floor like they were searching for a way in. They found one. That night, I dreamed of the clearing again, but it was no longer empty. The tree was back, but changed, twisted. Its bark pulsed like flesh, its roots coiled like veins, and from the hollow at its center, something crawled out. It wasn't Elijah, it was me, or something shaped like me. Same eyes, same clothes, same voice, but hollow, empty. It smiled and said, "You carried it, you fed it, you opened the door." I woke up screaming. My walls were bare. Every note, every photo, every drawing, gone. The whistle, gone. The cardboard sword, gone. I staggered to the mirror and stared into eyes that didn't blink when I did. I tried to fight it. I recited names, screamed them into the air, wrote them in marker across my arms, my chest, my face. But the ink bled, the names blurred, my voice cracked, and still I began to forget. I went to the clearing one last time. I don't know why. Maybe to bury the memory, maybe to bury myself. But when I arrived, someone was already there. A woman, thin, pale, long gray dress that moved like mist. She didn't turn when I approached, but she spoke. "You cracked the bark," she said, "but the roots are still alive. Who are you?" "Caretaker," she replied, "of what's left." I stared at the ground. It pulsed beneath our feet. "What is it?" "A god," she said, "not of fire or sky, but of forgetting, of rot, of memory too heavy to carry." "Why me?" She turned to me then, eyes like sap amber, face older than time. "Because you remembered, and remembrance is a seed." I fell to my knees. The air thickened around me. My chest tightened. I could feel it inside me now, crawling beneath my ribs, threading through my thoughts. The god wasn't dead. It had simply changed form. I was the new tree, the new vessel. "No," I said. The ground cracked. The forest screamed. The sky bled red. I dug my fingers into the soil, desperate, trembling, and I began to speak. Not names, but stories. Elijah's stories. The time we built a fort in the attic. The day he tripped and lost his tooth on a root. The jokes we made. The games. The secrets. I told the forest everything. And as I did, something shifted. The trees stopped swaying. The pulsing slowed. And from beneath the ground, I heard a cry. Not of pain, but release. I opened my eyes, and I was alone. No woman, no god, just sunlight breaking through the trees, painting gold across the clearing. The sap was gone, the sword gone. Even the roots beneath my feet felt quiet. I don't know if I destroyed it, or if I just buried it deeper. But I do know this. The forest hasn't taken anyone since. The town speaks names again. The children play near the trees. And I remember every day, every name, every loss, because that's the only way to keep it from coming back. Sometimes I still hear knocking at 3:03 a.m., but I never open the door. I just whisper a name into the dark, Elijah, and the knocking stops.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.